I've spent at least 25 of the last 34 years that I've worked in the NHS in a variety of different ways, bringing people, teams, services and now organisations together. We call this integration. So some examples. In my clinical role as a physiotherapist working with stroke survivors and their families, I was working to help people within the limits of their disability to integrate back into their roles in the family and into the workplace. I worked with the Department of Health on a research project that looked to bring all the professional case notes together into a single patient record for frail older people in hospital. And currently, I'm working with the leaders of our integrated care communities as they look for different ways to bring the different bits of healthcare, social care, third sector, and the communities themselves to think differently about how we keep safe and well and living in our communities. But throughout all those different roles I've done over the years, there's a common theme that threads through all of it, and that is that relationships matter. Relationships are what makes the difference in making integration work or not. In a recent publication by the King's Fund, which was reporting on how the first wave of integrated care systems were working across the NHS, we had this quote. This was on the very first page of this report. Transforming systems is ultimately about transforming relationships amongst the people that shape those systems. Many otherwise well-intentioned change efforts fail because their leaders are unable or unwilling to embrace this simple truth. Now, when I share this with people, and some of you are nodding, people get this. It makes perfect sense. And we know from our own experience, don't we, that this is the case. We just get it that work happens best when we feel safe and that the workplace is effective. So if we know this, my question is this: why do we spend so little time and energy proactively developing those relationships in the workplace? In my experience, it's usually seen as one of those nice to do things if you've got the time. It's a bit of a luxury, really. And if you happen to work in one of those places that gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling and makes you smile a lot, then great, but it isn't real work to actually create that. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm very comfortable with warm and fuzzy, and I do smile quite a lot. But I do recognise that others need something a bit more tangible, something that has a bit more evidence base behind it if we're going to bring it into our work. So I was absolutely thrilled about 4 years ago when I was introduced to the relational coordination framework. These 7 elements to the framework have got a wealth of evidence behind them. They're applied all over the world in healthcare, education and in industry to build effective working relationships. These elements describe for us what it is that makes the difference between an effective workplace where we get great outcomes or one that's poorly coordinated and the work is chaotic. It can even put a number on these things if we use the full survey tool so we can measure them if you want to. So what do they mean? There are 3 relational elements. Shared goals, the first one. That means that we understand what each other is trying to achieve in the work that we're doing. Might not be the same thing that we're all trying to achieve, but we do have a common end point. Shared knowledge. We know what each other's contributing into that work that's being done, and we understand what each other's roles are, what skills we have, and what expertise we're bringing. Mutual respect. We value that contribution and the role that's being delivered, and we treat each other with civility and trust that we'll do what we've said we will do. Then there's 4 elements of communication. Now, I don't think I have ever read a report following a serious incident or something of that nature in the workplace that hasn't said communication needs to be improved. These 4 elements, I think, really describe for us what we need to consider when we're working with others. Frequent means frequent enough to be able to do the work that has to be done. Now, that might be every 10 minutes if you're working in a very critical care environment, or it might be twice a year for some other work that gets done. Timely. The communication needs to happen when it's needed so that the work can carry on. That might be before the 9 o'clock daily huddle, or it might be every 3rd Thursday of the month, because that's when the multidisciplinary team meet. Accurate. The communication should include the information that's required. So if the team need a test result so that they can make a decision at the next review, then that test result should be included in the communication that happens. And problem solving in focus. We communicate so that we can help each other to progress the work. We check out that our communication has been what it needed to be, and we should be prepared to improve it if it hasn't, so that we can achieve this shared goal. So there's a reciprocal nature to these elements. They all feed each other. And we can either get a sort of virtuously continuously improving, ever upwards place in our work, or it can deteriorate and just fragment and descend into chaos. What the evidence also tells us about these elements is that they are even more important when the work we do is complex, interdependent, and time-constrained in nature. Does that ring any bells? Sounds familiar? Yeah? Now, I don't think this framework is yet another thing that we need to try and squeeze into our days when we're already under pressure. Rather, I see it as the frame around which we should deliver our work routinely. Because we know that time is precious and we know we should use it effectively. So when we think about a multidisciplinary team working with a 96-year-old, very vulnerable, fiercely independent lady who's refusing to go into a community hospital bed, rather than them getting frustrated and try to persuade her again tomorrow or later that day, what if somebody asked her what she needed and wanted to happen next? If they involved her neighbours and the carers in understanding what they could contribute and give to her so that she could remain in her own home? What if they asked those neighbours and carers what they needed to know so that an ambulance wasn't always called every time she fell? And if the professional experts considered what they could share of their knowledge and expertise so that they could really help to solve some of the problems that were being faced on a day-to-day basis. If these conversations were deeply respectful of the lady and her need, and if the paid carers, the nurses, the neighbours and the ambulance crew all valued each other's contribution equally, and they showed that explicitly in the interactions that took place. What if everyone concerned asked the right questions and found out what frequent, timely and accurate communication looked like for this lady at this point in time, and then delivered it? So whether we're working with individuals like that, or whether we're working to bring whole organisations together, the relational coordination framework helps us to add value to that real work. It will build better working relationships while we do our work, and it will help us to go home feeling better about the contribution we've made to the communities we serve, and probably with a smile on our faces more often too. It is a framework that we can all use to transform the quality of the work that we do. Thank you for listening.